Hello, and welcome to Revamped, a rewatch podcast that revisits my top favorite shows and movies. I'm your host, Brandon Alexander, joined by my co-host,
Courtney Autumn.
Venture with us as we set our sights on the infamous 𝙀𝙗𝙗 to cover 90s cult classic, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Follow along from the beginning, spoiler-free, as Courtney views the show for the first time and I revisit the series for new takes and a fresh perspective on its narrative.
Each season, every episode, in order, we will follow Buffy Summers and her friends to examine their character development, the show's underlying themes, along with its major story arcs, all while engaging in conversations, sharing our own authentic thoughts and feelings to what's unfolding before us.
So sharpen your stakes, load your crossbows, and join us as we explore the supernatural world of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Let's get into the episode. Season 1, Episode 2, The Harvest. Aired March 10th, 1997, as follow-up to the 2-hour special Welcome to the 𝙀𝙗𝙗. Also written by Joss Whedon and directed by John T. Kretschmer. Our synopsis for the episode: Buffy and her friends encounter a powerful vampire bent on aiding the Master in escaping from his underground purgatory, who once is freed plans on ruling the town and unleashing hell on Earth. Hello there, mate.
Hello there, mate.
All right, we're back for another episode. What do we think of the follow-up to Welcome to the 𝙀𝙗𝙗?
Well, as suspected, I was right in my predictions on what would happen next, so I'll leave it at that so we can dive into it properly, but Buffy's a badass as expected.
The actual badass. I have such great things to say at the end of this. I like how it immediately went right back from the episode and we see Buffy was unharmed, unscathed. Her coming into her own self a little bit and not being so hesitant as she was in the first episode was cool. So that way we know that she's going to help the situation. But Buffy actually stepped up a little bit more in this episode because she had something to care about with Jesse being kidnapped. She wasn't as reluctant against doing the whole slaying thing. She was like, look, now I've got some people that I've actually grown to like, and I have to put forth this effort to actually do my job and answer my calling. By the end, we get the whole group as they're like, so this is life now. This is the new normal. And they're like, nothing will ever be the same. But it's the new normal. This is our show. This is what we're going to be set up to do, is dealing with all the wackiness that's going to unfold as the supernatural things that are being gravitated towards the 𝙀𝙗𝙗, like how the Slayer will deal with them going forward from this episode.
Definitely.
Yeah.
In every generation, there is a chosen one. She alone will stand against the vampires, the demons, and the forces of darkness. She is the Slayer.
Getting into the episode, we pick up immediately where we left off at the end of Welcome to the 𝙀𝙗𝙗. Buffy is laying in that tomb. She's being pinned down by Luke as he closes in on her neck with his fangs. This time, To Be Continued doesn't pause across the screen. We see her struggling to break free of his grasp, only being able to budge slightly. Just as he is close enough to pierce skin, we start to hear a faint sizzling sound, and he draws back, clutching his hand as smoke rises off of it, and the sizzle intensifies. Alarmed, he looks down at Buffy to see her cross necklace his hand is rested upon is the culprit. SMG has a lot of ear piercings. Have you noticed that? I've always noticed that over
Yes.
the years that she has them, but I remembered this time around because I was sitting there looking at her laying back and that, and her hair is all off her side and obviously turned to the side conveniently so he can just eat her neck up. Buffy, using that moment, she is able to pull back her leg, and with a forceful grunt, she kicks Luke, sending him flying out of the coffin. She hops out and runs into the cemetery in search of her friends. No one in sight. As her pace slows, she begins to look around while Willow lets out a scream nearby. Buffy takes off in that direction. The vampire has Willow pinned on the grass, bringing his head to her neck when we hear Buffy shout, "Hey!" causing him to look up at her just as she delivers a kick to his face, knocking him backwards off his feet. He holds his nose and runs off. Buffy backs away and runs off as Willow sees Xander being drug off by 2 vampires behind a tree. She calls out his name, distracting the vampires, while Buffy moves into position, appearing behind them and simultaneously kicking the 2 vampires away from Xander. She rips off a piece of small branch from a nearby tree, once again being resourceful as fuck, and then stakes the vampires who fall off screen to their ashy death. They ain't had that budget that early in this episode to be paying that $2,000 for the vampires to poop.
I think about
Literally
that
me
every
too.
time. Now I feel like I'm just calculating their budget every time it happens. I'm like, well, there goes another couple grand. There goes another couple
Exactly.
grand.
Actually, Willow kneels down beside Xander, holding his back upright, asking if he's okay. Him delirious, saying something hit him. Buffy, hunched over now behind the 2, asks, "Where's Jessie?" Willow saying she doesn't know and that they surrounded them. Xander clarifies that the girl grabbed him and ran off, Buffy asking which way, but he isn't sure. She stands up straight as wind gently blows through her stray hairs. We get a shot of her face, which displays true worry, as she whispers out, Jesse. I like here because you can tell that Buffy is like really concerned over Jesse, just in that literal moment whenever she whispers out his name. That message being conveyed against SMG's face is like genuine upsettedness. And that bitch acting because ain't nobody care about Jesse, as you told us last episode that you were least excited about his existence.
Nobody.
As we learn what happens to him this episode, which is great. Goodbye, Jesse. Either way, we
Goodbye.
cue the Buffy theme. The next morning, a globe spins in the library as Giles walks behind it, placing a hand to slow its wind, carrying books down to the table space where Buffy, Willow, and Xander are lingering. As he quotes, "This world is older than any of you. Contrary to popular mythology, it did not begin as a paradise. For untold eons, demons walked the earth, who made it their home, their hell.
But in time, they lost their purchase on this reality. The way was made for mortal animals, for man. All that remains of the old ones are vestiges, certain magics, certain creatures.
And vampires."
Buffy finishing Giles' sentence, we see her holding an ice pack on her arm, walking up to stand just behind Willow, who is sitting at the table. We take notice here that Buffy is officially brandishing that iconic cross necklace that Angel gave her last episode. Just looking there great on her little business chest. Just had to say. Xander steps forward from leaning on the bookcases, arguing that this is the part that he has a problem with. You see, we're having a talk about vampires. He reemphasizes having a talk with actual vampires in it. Willow looks at him confused yet certain. Well, isn't that what we saw last night? She offers to the gang. Buffy goes on about how those weren't vampires. Those were just guys in need of a facial, or maybe they had rabies. Or the guy turning into dust, just a trick of light. She takes a more serious turn with Xander and Willow. Smartass Buffy. That's exactly the things that I said to myself the first time I saw a vampire. Of course, after she was done with the screaming part. Xander's face here also shows like that he takes notice of Buffy's sarcasm when she says this, because he like looked up with a little like kind of gleeful smile. I also want to note that I like his mushroom shirt here because I do be loving some mushrooms. I never noticed it before until this take that he had
I
a little
did
shirt with
notice
mushrooms
that.
on it. I was like, oh, look at him, kind of hippie. Willow is beyond overwhelmed, saying while her eyes seem unfocused and hazy,
Oh, I need to sit down.
You are sitting down.
Oh, good for me.
Willow forces if joyful. This shit killed me. Xander questions, so vampires are demons. Giles filling him in that the books tell of the last demon to leave this reality fed off a human and mixed their blood. He was in a human form possessed, infected by the demon's soul. He bit another. So then they walked the earth, killing some, mixing blood with others to make more of their kind, waiting for the animals to die out and the old ones to return. Underground, we see Darla entering the Master's lair in Vantface. Luke is behind her, pushing forward a struggling Jesse. Move, he says with a final push of Jesse, holding him by his shirt back. Y'all thought I was done. I am not. They stop at the feet of the Master's pedestal. Is this for me? The Master questions. An offering, Luke states. He's a good one. His blood is pure, Darla cheerfully tells him. This bitch is way too excited. The Master is enthused as he ganders at Darla, shifting his position to side lean like a diva, with his hands crossed one over the other. You've tasted it. Darla's head drops and looks down. I'm your faithful dog. You bring me scraps. Darla stammers that she didn't mean to, him cutting her off to explain that he has waited for 60 years, while they come and go as they please, while he's stuck here in this house of worship. We realize now that this is a sunken church that he is trapped within, and I gotta say that this set is dope. Like, you get more angles and like cuts in the architecture. The lighting is better than it was like the little brief scenes we saw him in the first episode. But I like how they constructed this, and it really imitates how it would look if an earthquake, as we found out later, causing, this church to sink into the ground. Like, the detail in here is like, chef's kiss. Once again, I still want to live there. He continues that his ascension is at hand. He moves over to Darla, whipping a hand over her face, cupping it gently, yet forcefully with intention, only to spook her with the motion. Pray I'm in a better mood when it comes, he utters to her as she quivers. Master, forgive me. We had more offerings, but there was trouble. A girl. Luke confirms, there was a girl. She fought well and knew of our breed. The Master looking over to him, Luke continuing, it is possible that she may be a slayer, the Master says with excitement. We switch back to the library where the conversation with the gang is arriving at the exact same point. These transitions here are amazing. They do this countless, as you know now, watching a few episodes, how they say one thing and then it immediately clips to the same thing happening somewhere else, but in a different kind of context. I love it.
I
The show
love it.
sets it up to be rather unique. Honestly, I don't think I've ever seen it again. One might say that they are unique in New York, but as we know, New York is not unique. And that would be what? Xander asks as they arrive at the same point of what a slayer is. For as long as there have been vampires, there have been the slayer. One girl in all the world, a chosen one. Looking over to Buffy, who cuts him off sarcastically, smiling, saying he loves doing this part. Forcing Giles to switch his tune to simplify, the slayer hunts vampires, Buffy is the slayer, don't tell anyone. Guessing that's all the info they really need about vampires. Except for, how do you kill them, Xander wonders. Well, you don't, Buffy does. That's exactly what Buffy says. Well, he begins to argue, Jessie is my responsibility. She allowed him to get taken. Xander claiming that's not true. Willow jumps in to say if she hadn't shown up, that they would have also gotten them. And once again revisits her shock as to what could have happened, overwhelming once more. She mentions passing out. Buffy telling her to breathe, Buffy announces that Luke talked about offerings to the Master, so if they weren't just feeding, maybe Jessie is still alive and she can find them. Willow questions why can't they just do the obvious and notify the police, both Giles and Buffy in agreement that they couldn't handle that, or wouldn't even believe them. Curious how they got away so fast, they think they escaped back underground, through the sewer systems, as this was the perfect way for them to get around the entire town without catching any sun's rays. Buffy claims that she didn't see any access to that in the area. Xander's saying that there's tunnels running all through the town. How does he know that? Who fucking knows? But Xander has to have this pointless information at disposal, of course, conveniently. Giles suggesting that they get the maps of the tunnel so they can find their way in and find their meeting place. Perhaps saying that they can get them from the city. Buffy scolding that they do not have that kind of time. Willow looks up at the group, finally grounded again, saying, guys, there might be another way. Back underground, the Master once again mutters, a slayer. Do you have any proof? Luke offering that only the fact she fought him and still lives. The Master saying this proves enough and recounts the last time that happened. Apparently it was 1843 in Madrid. Don't even understand this whole context of it because they talk about how he was caught sleeping. I'm not sure if they mean by a slayer or just the last time he let down his guard, but am still to this day seeing this episode 700 times, befoozled to all degrees of possibility.
I
Don't
still
know.
don't know.
But anyways, they can just clip this just like we could. The Master informs him that she must not be allowed to interfere with the harvest. Luke affirming he would never let that happen. No worries, the Master believing she'll come to them anyway. They have Jessie, something she wants. If she's a slayer, then she will try to save him. Luke looks next to him at Jessie, grabs him by the neck, taunting him, saying, I thought you nothing more than a mule boy. Jessie starting to breathe heavily with anxiety. Congratulations. You've just been upgraded to bait. Why do I do his voice like low-key so well, but high-key amazing?
No,
I hope
it's
everyone enjoys.
perfected.
At the library, we see a computer with a grid displaying maps of tunnels and blueprints of the town's layout. Closing in on the cemetery, Willow typing on the computer, zooming into the area they were in. Buffy pointing, there it is. Willow confirming that the tunnel runs under the graveyard, and Xander eyeing that he doesn't see any access. Giles behind them, opening up a mint and popping it into his mouth is astonished, yet questioning that the city just has all these plans open to the public. Willow shrugging that, in a way, she sort of stumbled upon them when she accidentally decrypted the city council's security system. Someone's been naughty, Xander adds to Willow's crash. Willow over here just hacking up into stuff. I know you a computer whiz, Willow, and we see what you can do with computers a little bit later. Over here doing all this shit.
I love it.
Willow is truly smart, though. She can decrypt things, obviously has mad computer skills. This already shows that she can be a true asset to Buffy and how. And honestly, Giles, too, because he actually tells her to get on the computer at different points and look up things, as he did in the first episode, and as he'll do basically every other episode we ever see of Buffy. Buffy begins to pace away and is frustrated that they didn't find the answer they needed and that this time has been useless, feeling underprepared. She thought she was on top of everything, but then that monster Luke came out of nowhere, her pausing recounting the events from the night before. In her mind, we get a flashback of Luke grabbing her neck and throwing her towards the entrance. He didn't come from nowhere. He came from behind me, not the entrance, and didn't follow me out. Coming to the realization that the access to the tunnels must be in the mausoleum. The girl must have doubled back with Jessie after she left, she says. Xander steps forward saying, what's the plan? Let's saddle up. Buffy saying, no, there's no we. She's the slayer and he's not. Xander annoyed she is throwing this back in his face. He steps back behind Willow and Giles, whimpering that he's inadequate and less than a man. I don't get why he had to make this point just to show his insecurities and really display it for us that this is the kind of person that Xander is. Willow tells Buffy that she wants to do her part and help. She needs to. Giles telling her to help them with the research on the harvest then, and that maybe she can get some information from that dreaded machine, looking at the computer. Here he goes, already asking her after I said 2 seconds ago to use the computer. Here she goes using the computer. His style being old-fashioned with books, he affirms his statement was a bit British. Then Buffy welcomes him to the new world. He corrects that he wants Willow to go on the net and do the research. Willow excitedly discloses that she can totally do that and begins to type. Buffy begins to walk away, saying she's out of there, and if Jesse's alive, she'll bring him back. Giles asks if he even needs to tell her to be careful, and she looks back at him softly, giving no answer. Out back of the high school, Buffy approaches the exit gate. This bitch looks fucking astonishing right here. The sun is doing some good work on her. The outdoor lighting that they have right now, these sunglasses up on top, pushing her bangs back with her bouncy hair.
Literally, listen, I'm gonna just go ahead while you brought it up because I literally put that she's looking like a snack.
That's exactly what I wrote. She is the moment. Anyways, Buffy approaches the exit gate. Just as she reaches its threshold, Principal Flutie stops her, having clearly seen her on a mission strutting toward it, grabbing hold of the gate. And where do we think we're going? Not leaving school grounds, are we? Buffy realizes she's caught, lies about admiring the fence work, while Flutie drops that if she were leaving school while it's in session, midday after getting kicked out of her old school for delinquent behavior, one could assume she was up to no good by doing as such. Buffy thinks on her feet to tell Flutie that she's headed out to grab a book for Mr. Giles. That seems pretty legit, and he could ask him. He instructs her that here at Sunnydale, nobody leaves school while it's in session. I'm pretty sure that's not just there, that's pretty much all school.
No, right.
And that may be how they do things in Britain, but he motions to fully close the gate and lock it before her. Are we clear? He asks to which she understands, and it's clear. Or so he thinks. He loves this, and proudly with a smile lets her know
That's the Buffy Summers I want in my school. Sensible girl with her feet on the ground.
ugh. He walks away, and we see the point of view of Buffy's feet in front of the gate. They leap up and leave the screen as she drops down on the opposite side of the fence and walks off. This was like a power move right here, where you see her hop in this fence and showing her skills, once again, her abilities even further. Little nods that she has these different things that she can utilize just on display before us. Some people get really upset, by the way, about how the fuck that she just flipped over this gate. Like the fact that she just goes up and falls down so seamlessly. It's not like she falls down and squats or anything. She literally just hopped up real quick. You know what I'm saying? Xander and
I
Willow work
legit-
their way down the hallways of the school, jotting some keywords for points to research and hopefully get some hits of info. Anything that will lead them to vampires, Willow says. Xander mentions how in the meantime, while she's working and Buffy's out, he'll be of no use standing around like an idiot, to be exact. Willow tells him that he won't be standing as such, just standing, aka he won't be an idiot, even though, basically is. And that they don't want him to get hurt. Xander goes on a short rant about how this is all too much. Yesterday his life wasn't as complicated, but today this has all changed. Willow agrees, looking at all the other students passing by, carrying on with their normal lives, putting it out there that none of them know this whole other world. It's like we have this big secret, he throws out to her. Well,
We do. That's what a secret is, when you know something other guys don't.
she points out to him. The bell rings and Xander points behind him to their classroom door, suggesting that Willow should get to class. You mean we, she smirks. She thinks Buffy will be okay, and whatever is down there she can handle, and so does he, to which again says, so do I. Given the idea that both are entirely unsure and not confident in that matter. Buffy is in danger, they said. Girl, you better back out. You in danger. You gonna make it back. You gonna be...
I was like, girl, you in
gonna be
danger,
dead like
girl.
Jesse. We arrive back at the graveyard, and the door to the mausoleum opens and Buffy steps in. Hesitant in her steps as she looks around, raising her sunglasses off the top of her head, rats scurry behind her squeaking. She moves to the very back of the crypt towards a set of iron-paneled doors that weren't as visible in the night that are chained shut. The man from the night before who gave her the cross necklace that burned Luke in the same spot steps out from the shadows along the wall toward Buffy as we see them both from the holes in the gate from its opposite side. Without turning around to acknowledge, she knows he's there. She says aloud, I don't suppose you've got a key on you, having sensed his presence. Another display here of Buffy's abilities, sensing when someone's in the room with her, most undoubtedly being a sign of her constant awareness to her surroundings as the Slayer. I want these powers. Because you know how you just be sitting around and you'd be like, oh, I
know,
feel
me
like a
too.
presence in the room. And it'd be a ghost and it'd be like, hey, what's up? Exactly.
I
Oh,
don't want
okay.
that to
Well,
happen.
me neither. The man tells her that they really don't like him dropping in. That they really don't like him, he tells her, clapping back sarcastically. How could that possibly be? Buffy says. The man tells her he thought she'd have found this entry way sooner than now, being a smartass. She apologizes for his wait and requests that he go ahead and introduce himself.
Okay. Look, if you're to be popping up with this cryptic wise man act on a regular basis, can you at least tell me your name?
Angel.
Angel. It's a pretty name.
We learn Angel's name here. A moment in time. Heart, I wrote here. Because I'd be like an angel, I'm just saying. Angel. It's a pretty name, she says, raising her eyebrows, turning back to the gate. Don't go down there, he begs. He needs to deal with her going, she says, as he goes on to say, tonight is the harvest. She shouldn't be putting herself at risk. She needs to be out there for that. If she's not there to prevent it, the master walks. She asks why doesn't he do something about it, and he declares because he is afraid. She kicks out a leg behind her, and the chain breaks, swinging the doors open, informing him that she has a friend down there. And that's what you do for friends. And doesn't he have any friends to help understand this logic? Angel grows quiet, blank and dull. Silence. That wasn't supposed to be a stumper, taking notice that maybe he doesn't, feeling bad for him. He perks back up and tells her which direction to find them down there, not far from the school underground. You gonna wish me luck? She asks. She disappears behind the doors into darkness, and we see him whisper to himself for her. Good luck. The fact that Buffy is just going to go down here, by the way, to no matter like what she might be facing, this Slayer is a fucking badass. I'm pretty sure that's all Slayers in general in the past. I mean, we don't know them, but that confidence, oh, I have this power, I know I can wield it. But she seems to be more afraid of like her humanity and mundane life at this point more than her as a Slayer in the beginning, you know?
For sure.
Buffy makes her way down a set of stone stairs. Coming to the bottom, she hears rats again, and one crawls over her foot. She is calm and continues forward. We hear water dripping as she passes through through tunnel after tunnel, cutting corners and making rounds. She turns back to look behind her to check before taking a new turn, and there's Xander to spook her. A nice little jump scare moment. What are you doing here? She asks. Something stupid. I followed you. I couldn't just sit at home and do nothing, he says. She understands, but then tries to persuade him to go away. He presses a hard no at her. Look, Jesse's my bud, okay? If I can help him, that's what I gotta do. She realizes he's going to remain persistent and nods her head for him to come along with her down the passageway. Besides, it's this or chem class. On their way, he lists off crosses, garlic, stake through the heart. That'll get it done, she says. Cool. Of course, I don't actually have any of those things. She passes him a hand-sized cross she had tucked away, and he mentions that the part of his brain that would tell him to bring any of those things is still busy telling him not to come down here. He switches on a flashlight, saying, I did bring this, though. Annoyingly, Buffy whispers, turn that off. They continue the convo on what else promotes vampire slayage. She lists off a few and focus in on her beheading comment, to which she gives a short story about one time she was being attacked by a varsity player vamp from her school, and he had a really thick neck, and all she had was this little X-Acto knife. He chuckles nervously, and she decides to stop the story. We pan back to the library as Giles flips through a book, quoting from the book, For they will gather and be gathered. From the vessel pours life. On the night of the crescent moon, first part of the solstice, it will come. Realizing that the harvest is tonight, we end our scene here and we cut to a computer class where Cordelia is working and having trouble with her said work. Harmony, her blonde-haired friend, looks over from the computer next to her she's working on, asking if they're going to the Bronze tonight. Duh, Friday night, no cover. Of course they are going. Of course we're never going to see the cover get taken because that was only in episode 1. But she goes on to tell Harmony that she should have been there last night. She ran into Buffy and how she couldn't be any weirder. Willow is shown to be in the same class, working behind them, following up on her research for the harvest, and overhears Buffy's name and starts to listen in. She attacked me. Do you believe it? Cordelia continues. Errors start popping up on Harmony's computer, and she says, I think we did this part wrong. Cordelia declaring, aren't nerds supposed to do all this tech stuff? Motioning over to Willow, asking Harmony, what does she do? So they can potentially copy her assignment. Harmony takes a look back, realizing Willow's screen is displaying info on earthquakes. She's doing something else, Harmony replies. Cordelia and Harmony continue unsure if they're completing it correctly when Cordelia goes on to say, anyway, I come out of the bathroom and Buffy comes running at me with a stick screaming, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kill you. I swear. A fellow student, Mel, pops into frame. Oh my God, this guy. In the most awful, he has like the most awful surfer-esque wonder of, who? He's like, whoa. Who are you talking about? Like, I don't even know if that's correct, but that's like how I'm gonna say he was doing it. It's just like that Californian fucking surfer dude.
He's a dude.
Buffy, Cordelia confirms, mentioning she's crazed. The new girl, Harmony, adds, did you hear about her old school? Cordelia and the boys shaking their heads no. Booted, she finishes. Well, I exhibit no surprise, Cordelia says, as the boy asks why she was kicked out, and Cordelia offers, cause she's a psycho loony. Willow speaks up to them, overhearing over her shoulder, arguing with them simply, no, she's not. Cordelia, stunned, looks back at her with a, what? She's not a psycho. You don't even know her. Excuse me, Cordelia goes on. Who gave you permission to exist? Do I horn in on your private conversations? No. Why? Because you're boring. Willow sends items to be printed and gets up to go collect them from the printer. Harmony says, okay, I think the program is done. Cordelia thinking that this nightmare has ended. How do we save it? Willow looking over at them saying, deliver. Cordelia looks at the keyboard. Where's deliver? And then she sees a key that displays DEL. Oh, she exclaims and presses the button. That must be it. The file that she has been working on completely erases from the system, and her mouth drops, realizing what has happened. Honestly, though, this first thing I have to say, with this being our first impressions of Cordelia, fuck her. As episode 2 fresh, as if I've never seen any of this show, I would be set up to hate Cordelia at this point, because she is just a straight up bitch.
She seems
A
like a
bully
bully
ass
bitch
bitch.
for sure. I was happy about it. I was like, I even wrote a note about it. I was like, good, I'm glad your shit deleted.
Obviously, like me myself, I can't tolerate this when she says this to Willow, because saying that Willow is boring so blatantly, just being plain nasty, that it's gross to me. And she absolutely gets what Willow does to her, which
Yeah.
also was entirely clever on Willow's part and very quick thinking. Like, Willow might be dull and boring to you, lower than even, but she has you beat on smarts, Cordelia, all day and tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
We see Xander and Willow
Yeah.
back in the tunnels underground. We see Xander and Willow. It's like, Willow is not down there.
Because we were talking about her too much.
We see Xander and Buffy back in the tunnels underground. They're close, Buffy says to him. He asks how she can tell, and she mentions that there are no more rats. They look down on the ground before them. At a split, Xander turns on his light, and they see Jesse, who jumps up with a piece of pipe when they call out to him. Xander, he hugs him. Are you okay? Xander asks. Jesse mentioning he's not okay on an epic scale, and we take notice to his feet being shackled. And he says, we gotta get out of here. It's cool. Buffy's a superhero, Xander says, as she reaches down and busts his chain with the back end of the flashlight, setting him free. With loud clinks, he says out loud, do you think anyone heard that? As we see shadows approaching and then vampires growl and appear at opposite ends of the hallway, they move the other way. Jesse mentions that they knew you were going to come. They said he was the bait. They come to the hallway's end, realizing that there are more vampires that direction. Jesse freaking out, like completely freaking out, whimpering, oh, no, 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 no. I was like, boy. Buffy asks if he knows another way out. Him saying, oh, maybe come this way. And they take off running different directions. Not all different directions, but just differing in directions. Like we see them panning around, like going down one hallway, not being it, going to the next one, each end showing that there are more vampires lingering. When they come to another end that's dead and a room, the vampires, you see their claws and that glow in the dark eyes type bullshit. Did you notice that? I think it's cool, but it's
Yes.
like obviously very campy and extra. And I have to give you the spoiler alert that this will go away eventually, aka I don't think we ever see it again after this moment. So that way you ain't looking for the cold glowing
Just the
eyes and
one
the
time.
nails, like really taking notice to the like.
It's
I'm
a
on
one
hit
hit
wonder.
wonder.
Goodbye, vamps. I don't think this is the way out, Buffy shouts. We can't fight our way back out. What do we do? Xander speaks just as Jesse looks at him, his face displaying he's morphed into a vampire. Him saying, I got an idea. You can die. Having lured them to this room, Buffy realizes and her face looks shocked. Jesse, man, I'm sorry, Xander says, shaking his head. Sorry? I feel good, Xander. I feel strong. I'm connected, man, to everything. He goes on that he knows what the Master wants and he will serve his purpose, and he will feed on them, leaning in toward Xander. Buffy is over at the door trying to drive it closed, but it's wedged. She looks over and reminds Xander of the cross, which he quickly whips out, and Jesse hisses. Jesse, we're buds, don't you remember? Jesse saying he's a shadow to him, and Xander telling him to get out of his face. Buffy moves over, grabs Jesse, and slings him out of the door into the hallway. She ushers for Xander to help her close the door. They get it sealed and locked temporarily as the vampires begin to rip into it, ultimately breaking it down. Holy hell right here, though. You see them vampires bend in that metal? They were grabbing them corners and just anchoring that shit down. I'm like, damn. And Buffy grabs these things.
I know. And I was like, y'all
Gotta
better
get the
hurry
fuck
up.
up out of there. Like, and then Buffy obviously, ironically, goes, oh, hey, I see a way up there in the air duct that we can crawl up into and get the fuck out. So she begins to pry that cover off, and Xander and her escape into it. Vampires flooding in after them into the space. They continue moving down it, only to come to a small ladder with a sewer grate going up above. Xander uncovers it and crawls out into the daylight, showing that they are at an electrical plant. Buffy crawls up and out behind him. When her foot is almost out, a vampire grabs her leg. The vampire's arm comes up just enough grasped onto her ankle as sunlight starts to burn into its skin. Letting go, it lets out a visceral growl, and they fall back onto the pavement in relief that they've escaped. Back in the Master's lair, she escaped. She walks free when I should be drinking her heart's blood right now, careless. he bitches to the vampires. Colin the vampire, in charge of this event, declares that they had her trapped, but she escaped. The master, not wanting excuses, tells them that they are all weak. It has been too long since they have faced a slayer, but it's no matter to him. Just means he will have someone to kill when he reaches the surface. She will be unable to stop the harvest. He asks if Luke is ready, and they agree. The master instructs they bring him to him, but as they all leave, he walks up to Colin, urging him to linger behind a moment, prefacing that he's failed him and to tell him he's sorry. Colin offers up his apologies. There, that wasn't too bad, was it? The master continues. But hold on. He extends a pointed finger outward, and we hear a squishing noise. Ugh.
You've got something in your eye.
Having penetrated that said finger into Colin's eye socket as punishment. Gross. I will say, though, that we get some great shots of the master's features here more up close. We haven't really got it. He's mostly been afar.
Yes.
And I wanted to take notice that he has these beaming red eyes and clammy looking skin, and his features like almost resemble that of like a bat. His face is kind of contorted in and stuff.
Yeah, and he has like those like things on it in
Like
his
the
face that
indentations
are
and
like,
stuff. I'll also point
yeah,
out too
yeah.
here that we can really see that around his mouth is stained permanently a pinkish hue, as if he's like just been drinking blood for so long that it's soaked into his
Drinking
pasty
blood.
ass skin.
Yes, because he's quite literally white
But
as a sheet of paper.
do like learn later that whenever vampires get to a certain age, that they start to mimic features of like a more primordial evil entity. They don't look quite, they lose their human looks and they start to take a different type of form. Yes,
Aesthetic.
exactly. To lose the human looks.
Yeah.
In the library, where Giles still is pondering books, we hear the doors open and he looks over, calling out Buffy's name. We see Willow carrying the pages she's printed. It's just me. So, no word? Giles informs her no, not yet, then asking if she's found anything of interest. Willow brings the papers over, informing him she's searched through old newspaper articles back to 1937, around the time a big earthquake occurred, and several months before there had been a rash of murders, sounding like the ones Giles was looking for. Throats, blood, it's all coming together, Giles says. And we cut back to the master's lair. Just as the space is coming together, Darla is lighting a few candles. Luke approaches the master. It's clear that they are creating a sacred ritual space for it to be performed. Luke kneels down and kisses the master's hand. Flipping it over as music intensifies, he bites into the master's wrist, drinking a gush of his blood. My blood is your blood. My soul is your soul, he preaches to Luke. Luke replying, my body is your instrument. The master continues, on this most hallowed night, we are as one. He reaches to collect some of his blood from the wound on his wrist, with his thumb adorning a symbol onto Luke's forehead, finishing his statements as Darla looks on in awe. Luke is the vessel. Every soul he takes will feed me, and their souls will grant me the strength to free myself. Tonight I shall walk the earth, and the stars themselves will hide. He says that with so much more intensity than the way I just said it, so I'm probably going to put the fucking clip in there.
Tonight I shall walk the earth, and the stars themselves will hide.
He's like wildin', almost sounding like fucking annoying ass Luke, but not really. We return to Willow in the library, sitting alone. Buffy and Xander enter, Willow happily asking, did you find Jesse? Yeah, Xander mentions. Was he dead? Worse. I'm sorry, Willow, we were too late. They were waiting for us, Buffy tells her.
Sorry.
Willow says at least the two of them are okay, as Xander kicks a recycling bin by a side table, saying, I'm just going to take a stand saying I don't like vampires. They're not good. So Giles, got anything to make this day worse? Buffy questions. How about the end of the world? He tells the group. Buffy sarcastically proceeding to say that she knew she could count on him to, in fact, deliver the worst news. Giles begins to fill them in on what they do know. 60 years ago, a very old, powerful vampire came to this shore, not just to feed. Buffy questioning, he came here because this town is a mystical who's it? Giles continues, yes, the Spanish who first settled here called it Boca de la Infierno, roughly translated to Hellmouth, a sort of portal between this reality and the next, while this vampire aimed to open it. Bring the demons back, end the world, Buffy and Xander add. But he blew it, Willow states, or at least there was an earthquake that swallowed half the town along with him. Giles offering that opening dimensional portals can be tricky, and during this, he got himself stuck in this space while Xander confirms to the group, so this harvest thing is to get him out. Giles says this event comes once in a century on this night. He can draw power from one of his minions as it feeds. The minion is called the Vessel. Luke, the Vessel. Giles moves over to the whiteboard and begins to draw, and he bears this symbol, he states. Displaying the symbol before the group, Buffy gets up and walks over to it. So I dust anyone sporting that symbol in no harvest. Any ideas where this get-together might take place? Xander speaks up, it will be at the Bronze. All those tasty young mortals, and he's sure that's where Jesse would go. Giles collects his jacket, declaring that they should get there. They all usher in line together, one behind the other, toward the exit as Buffy says that she needs to make a stop for supplies along the way. For everyone listening, if you still to this day go to Google and you type Boca de Infierno into like detected language on Google Translate, it will translate it to English and indeed literally says hell mouth. Just saying. I didn't know that. I was like, I wonder if that's accurate because sometimes
What?
TV shows and like movies be having like inaccurate stuff, or like you'll hear them speaking Japanese on the screen. And it's not
They
really
just be
Japanese,
making
it's like
shit up.
Korean or some shit. Like they just be putting subtitles up on the screen.
Or they're telling you that the Japanese letters say something meaningful, and really it just
It
says
does not
like
be that way at all.
shit.
We get a glimpse of the sun setting, and we're now in Buffy's room as she's changed her clothing to a white v-neck top, bearing the cross necklace still and tying her hair up in a ponytail. She moves over to her closet to pull out a brown leather jacket. We hear a voice call out her name at the doorframe. Buffy shuts the closet door to reveal her mother standing there. She asks if she's going out and sounds concerned. I have to, Buffy says. Her mother continues she didn't hear her come in last night, to which Buffy says she was really, really quiet. Her mother looks fed up, saying, "It's happening again, isn't it? I got a call from your principal. Said you missed some classes? We're not even done unpacking boxes, and I'm already getting calls from the principal." Buffy tries to promise her mother it's not like before, but she has to go. No, her mother firmly begins, while Buffy lets out a teenage wail. Mom, this is really, really important. Her mom repeats, no, telling her that the tapes all say that she needs to get used to saying it and that she understands.
I know. If you don't go out, it'll be the end of the world. Everything is life or death when you're a 16-year-old girl.
Buffy tries to tell her mom that she doesn't have time to talk about this, her mom telling her that she has all the time in the world and she's not going anywhere. If she wants to stay up in her room and sulk over this decision, then fine, but otherwise she can come downstairs and she'll get dinner started. She vacates her room, closing the door behind her. Buffy sighs and reopens the closet, pulling out a trunk, opening it to reveal trinkets and girly items, safekeepings. She lifts up a portion of the top, for further revealing that it's a decoy layer, hiding away crosses, stakes, holy water, garlic bulb clusters, like what are those going to do though, and other various tools for destroying the undead. Like, if this was not me as a 12, 13-year-old watching this show, over here trying to like conceal fucking stakes in between my mattresses, and just saying. Wild. Buffy and me are the same. She grabs a few items such as holy water, spare stakes, loads them into her duffel bag, slips a very pointed one into her jacket sleeve, moves over to her window, she slides it up and sends the bag sliding down the roof slant onto the ground, Buffy climbing out the window and easing her way down after it. As the sun disappears and it's now night, we are stationed at the Bronze as people enter inside, play pool, and hang out. Cordelia, already present, makes her way with her group upstairs, discussing senior boys and how they're the only way to go, and comments on how high school boys are like children, asking if they took notice how Jessie was following her around the night before like a little puppy dog, stating that she wanted to just put him down. But senior boys, they have mystery, lushing after how they have cars. She's not the type to settle. When she goes shopping, it's not like she has to have the most expensive thing, but she has to have it because it costs more. One of the other girls in the group trying to give her her 2 cents, and Cordelia shutting the fuck up with her me attitude. Cordelia snaps at her and calls out that she's Miss Motormouth. She was not finished speaking. We hear Wearing Me Down by Dashboard Prophets begin to play. Cordelia extends that she loves this song and let's go down below to dance. The way these bitches just follow up underneath Cordelia, they will do whatever she says in hope that she will continue to see them as cool. I hate people like this.
She's very
She's
like
100% Regina George
George.
before she was even a thing. I mean, I think we'll say that for the next like 12 episodes. On the
Oh,
dance floor,
shit.
we get shots of Cordelia moving to the music as Jessie leans against a post in the background, eyeing her down. He has a different presence than before, almost displaying the mysterious vibe Cordelia had previously mentioned. She takes notice to him moving in the crowd, staring at her. The song ends, and she begins to walk off the floor. She bumps into Jessie, who has a hand drawn to his mouth, and he's touching and fondling his lips. I gotta say right here, though, Jessie kind of looked hot. Him lurking in the background, it was so much better than the first episode. Like, he just had more confidence. He was obviously a Scorpio.
But doesn't that speak to you, though, just about having confidence, how different you can just appear
Honestly,
to
and when
a
you
room of people
and when
or
you
in
don't have a
general?
conscious anymore, the things that you'll like naturally gravitate to like move in your being to be, you know what I mean? Without the thought of overthinking or anything like that.
It's just like your
Yes.
instinct.
Anyways,
Yeah.
Cordelia bumps into him and goes, "Ugh, what do you want?" He grabs her by the hand and motions over to the dance floor as a grungier, slower toned song by the same artist called Ballad for Dead Friends begins to play. "Hey, hello," she calls out, "caveman brain, I said no." He tells her innocently to shut up and begins to dance with her. Well, just this one dance, she says, and they begin to dance. She caved way too quick, I'm just saying, but she's into it, I think. Just outside the entrance, Darla approaches ahead of Luke and a gang of vampires. Need ID, the bouncer tells them as they walk by him. Hey, nobody gets in till I see some ID. Luke turns to him and growls and says to get inside. They enter the club with the bouncer, a vampire staying at the door to guard it, another heading to shut off the main power panel to fill the place with darkness except for the emergency lighting.
It was
Didn't
very
notate before.
mood.
I wanted to add earlier that I do wish, I know you said last episode that you were like, I hate Jesse, whatever. I think it would have been cool because of this scene and this little interaction if he had been brought on as more of a villain versus his end, like that happens in just a little bit with Xander. Like it would have been cool to see that as a problem, especially for like Xander to have to face maybe like more drawn out, and especially to maybe even keep the actor like on for like a few more episodes.
Totally. That's where I kind of thought it was going. I was like, certainly he'll be here for like
Yes, he's
the
going to be
whole
part of
first
the
season.
Master's crew. That's honestly what Jesse serves as purpose because he was a main character. And I can actually throw this in here now because I'm remembering something from hearing it. Originally, they were going to pay for Jesse to be in the main title sequence for the first 2 episodes. And then they didn't want to pay all that money to have him in the sequence, but they wanted that to be in there so that way, like Drew Barrymore at the beginning of Scream. Drew Barrymore was such a big labeled name. Not that the guy that played Jesse was, but she was such a big labeled name, and everybody expected her to be in the entirety of the movie or stay longer. And she dies in the opening sequence of Scream. So it's kind of like mirroring that same type of trope with Jesse. So just put out there that nobody is safe. Anything can happen in this show. Like your best friend can literally die, or somebody we just met in the show could be gone like in an instant.
Yeah. Brace yourself
Break
for
yourself
plot
for
twist.
death. Luke is seen now on the stage before the group. Ladies and gentlemen, he calls out to them. There's no cause for alarm. He steps into a bit of light, gleaming onto his face, and revealing his terrifying features. People begin to shriek and get scared. Actually, there is cause for alarm. It just won't do any good, he states as he chuckles. I love myself. I want to point out that the mark on Luke's head appears to be burned here now versus like just dried blood. It looks like a scar. And I really hadn't paid that too much attention. I knew that symbol was still there, but I'm actually paying attention to it this time around. I guess maybe the Master's blood, they wanted to change the look of it or something like that, because I don't understand why it just would be dried blood on his face, you know? I guess they thought the burned in mark would look cool.
I guess to make it seem like
Yeah, like he's the vessel
permanent
for
or
life at this point.
something.
Anybody he
Yeah.
drinks, I guess the Master's getting fed for life, except not really because we know it's about to happen to old Luke.
Mhm.
Anyways,
Goodbye.
Cordelia says, I thought there was no band performing tonight. Looking over to Jesse beside her and seeing his vampire face, she gasps. Luke continues that it is a glorious night, and it is also the last that any of them will ever see, and tells his group to bring up the first. A vampire pushes the bouncer onto the stage. Hey, what's wrong with your face? The dude says to him. I died right here. I was like, he just says, what's wrong with your face, dude? Like, you ain't seen them when they brought your ass in here. And Luke grabs him strongly by the throat, starting to choke him, pushing his head to the side and leaning in to bite him, finishing a statement of, watch me, people. The fear's like an elixir. It's almost like blood. Well, it is blood. Anyways, he drains the blood out of the bouncer, and we get a shot of the Master below ground taking notice to the energy changing within him. Sensing Luke has begun, Luke drops the bouncer dead to the ground, saying, next. Buffy and the gang run up to the bronze entrance, and she pulls on the door handle, shouting, it's locked. Giles stating, they are too late. Well, I didn't know I was going to get grounded, Buffy whines to him. Xander asking, can't she just break it down? She says it's not that kind of door, but she will find another way in, and they should try to find the back entrance. She hands off her bag to Willow and states that their duty is to get the people out, and the exit is cleared, and that's all. They separate, and we see the 3 arrive at the back entrance that's also locked. Xander says they need to get in there before Jesse does something stupid. This part killed me. Giles starts wagging his finger at him, and he's firmly stating that he listened to him now. The fact that Jesse is dead only reminding him that is not his friend in there, and that is the thing that killed him. Giles had to beat this into Xander's head. This is the second time now that Xander has been told this episode that that's not his friend anymore. And Xander's still thinking there's got to be some way to save him type bullshit. No, your friend is gone. This is a fucking vampire.
He is
Like,
gone.
I just don't understand why he doesn't understand his friend's not in there anymore.
Xander is also, I'm used to him being stupid
It's
at
been
this
all of
point.
like, 67 minutes? He's just hard-headed. It's really frustrating. Anyways, we see the Master reaching out to his force field that seems to be growing weaker as we get more shots of different people Luke is feeding upon. Almost free, the Master screams, looking upward, give me more! Shouting to the roof. Nearby, Darla grabs at Cordelia, Jesse declaring, hey, this one's mine. Darla affirming, they are all for the Master. She tugs Cordelia away from him. Jesse confused, questioning, I don't get one? We hear a small crash in a window upstairs as Buffy crawls through it and approaches the loft's barred ledge, looking down at Luke rambling on about how every person brings him closer, that he can feel him rising, and he needs another. Buffy can clearly see that he has the mark of the vessel on his forehead as a vampire upstairs looks over at her, growling and gaining her attention. Luke yells out to the crowd that tonight is his ascension. Tonight will be history at its end. Yours is a glorious sacrifice, a degradation most holy. But he is perturbed that there are no volunteers to go next. Well, Luke, you're talking too fucking much. I would volunteer to go up next at this point just to get your ass to shut up. Darla pushes
Same.
Cordelia up on the stage. Here's a pretty one, she yells out. Cordelia screams a few times as Luke grabs her by the head, tilting it, exposing her neck. We hear a punch, and the vampire from upstairs come crashing down onto the dance floor before Luke. We see Buffy step up to the bar, and Luke meets eyes with her. Oh, I'm sorry. We're in the middle of something, Buffy banters. You, he shouts at her.
You didn't think I'd miss this, did you?
He expresses that he hopes she'd come. She says she'll be right down, and she flips over the railing down below, landing on a pool table gracefully. A vampire runs after her, and in one motion she somersaults forward off the table, grabbing a pool cue as she flips forward. The pool cue perfectly lining up into the heart of the vampire that we see running at Buffy, and for a moment it just bobs in front of her as it falls back off the screen, clearly embedding him, turning to dust off screen for the $2,000 mark that they could not have. She removes her coat and drops it behind her. You want blood? She calls out. I want yours, Luke says, shoving Cordelia away. Only yours. Luke, you need to shut up. I wanted to say, too, because I had written here in notes that if they had killed Cordelia this early on, I'm not so sure anyone would have cared. Like, if she died in this moment. Because after she was a bitch to Willow and shit earlier, like, she would not have cared.
You're so right. She's just been
I'm really trying to see
asshole
this with
whole
the first
time.
perspective, as if I don't know anything that goes down. But, like, legit, she would have, like, not been cared for. Anyways, works for me, Buffy says as she runs full force towards the stage, doing a flip and delivering a backwards roundhouse kick to Luke, who crashes into some nearby chairs. Her fist up, he gets up to attack her more, her blocking his advances, grabbing his arm and delivering more kicks to his abdomen. Thinking that she has the upper hand, she pulls out her stake and she goes to swing at him. He blocks it, knocking it from her grasp, throwing her backwards into Box's side stage. We see the stake fall onto the floor, and at this moment we hear the back door crash and open as Willow, Xander, and Giles come rushing in. They start to usher people to come on and exit to head out. The people begin to flee, and a vampire seeing this grabs Xander from behind. Buffy takes notice, grabs a cymbal off the drum set on the stage, and slings it towards the vampire, taking his head off, and Xander puns, heads up. So corny right here, but also another $2,000 budget cut that they couldn't have. Because we do not see that vampire dust. Buffy lets out a laugh just as Luke grabs her from behind, squeezing her, rendering her lifeless at the moment. All the while, Jesse pushes Cordelia onto the ground and hovers over her. Cordelia throwing her arms up in defense, he grabs them and pries them to her sides, gaining advantage, yelling at her to hold still and that she's not making this easy. Xander walks up behind him, calling out his name, Jesse, and wielding a stake. Hey man, don't make me do it. Buddy, Jesse says as he turns around and looks at Xander. We see Luke still squeezing Buffy on the stage, mentioning that he's always wanted to kill a Slayer. Growling with anticipation, we see Giles continuing to usher people out the back as he whispers, quickly, quickly. We see Darla leap onto his back, and he begins to try to fight her off. Xander, still holding the stake up, shouts at Jesse, I know there's still a part of you in there. Xander, you need to calm the fuck down. It's been a whole 7 minutes since Giles told you that tangent outside about Jesse, and he's still unconvinced. This is take 3 for Xander, and I'm fucking done. Jesse drops his advances on Cordelia and stands up, turning to face Xander. Okay, let's deal with this. Jesse was an excruciating loser who couldn't get a date with anyone, and to look at him, he's a new man, he tells him excitedly. We see Luke still holding Buffy, who has appeared to pass out. Master, taste of this and you will be free, he calls out as he opens his mouth wide to chomp Buffy, who opens her eyes and slings her head back into his face abruptly with great force, sending him back and asking him, how did it taste? Because, he just tasted the back of her fucking head. In the back, we see Darla struggling on the ground with Giles as Willow comes up behind her, screaming, get off him, as she opens the bottle of holy water from the bag. Darla looks behind her and Willow slings the water onto her face. Holding her face as it smokes, she runs out the back exit screaming. Did you notice this horror movie scream that plays right here that was fake? It's like,
Yes.
it was totally 1999 fucking horror track. But anyways, I call this move dousing Darla. Dousing her with the holy what? Jesse grabs Xander and slings him into a column post, Xander's stake right up against his chest. He taunts Xander, saying, Ooh, right. Put me out of my misery. You don't have the guts. But as more people rush to the exit of the bronze, one of them accidentally crashes into Jesse, pushing him forward into the stake. Embedding it into his chest, he lets out a grunt and fades to dust. While some other vampires grab Xander, taking him hostage once again. On stage, Buffy picks up the metal stand that held the symbol and aims it at Luke, who comments, "You forget metal can't hurt me." Buffy declares there's something he forgot about too: sunrise. She tosses the metal spear at the window just behind Luke that breaks, sending warm light from it outside into the building and onto his face. Him facing the light begins to cover his face and grunt. When he notices that he is not burning, we see Buffy stand up behind him, grab her stake, and raise it up, taking a few steps toward him and implanting it through his back into his heart. He turns around to look at her, confused, defeated, as she lets out to him with a heavy amount of angst, wit, and satisfaction within herself as well.
It's in about 9 hours, moron.
He groans and moans some more and walks towards the edge of the stage. We get a little slow motion shot of this as he's falling off. He crashes into a pile of dust on the floor. This once again shows how resourceful Buffy is and clever, using items in her environment to get the job done, like the tree in the beginning, the pool cue, and the light idea. She pays way too much attention to her surroundings and how they can work for her at her advantage. Once again, she's very mindful and very demure. Love that quote. In this motion, we see the Master pressing into the force field and dropping to his knees when it grows back at full force, screaming and crying out. He's very, very pissed. The vampires that grab Xander are making their way off with him. As they look back to the stage, taking notice to Luke's dusting, we get our first power stance of Buffy. She is the baddest bitch.
She's an icon, she's a legend, and she is the moment.
Cool blue and white light shines down upon her. Her face goes up from the same spot on the ground, up to the vampires. They exchange a look between one another. They drop Xander and flee in fear out the room and outside. We get a shot of them outdoors as they run past Angel, who lingers behind some containers. "She did it. I'll be damned," he says while walking away. Back on the bronze, the gang reunites and the four of them stand before the stage at the dance floor. Giles, slipping on his glasses, says that he takes it's over now. Willow asks, "Did we win?" Xander hands Buffy her jacket and she states, "Well, we averted the apocalypse. I give us points for that." Xander tells the gang,
"One thing's for sure. Nothing's ever going to be the same."
We immediately cut to the next day at school where everything is the same and it's bright and sunny, seemingly just as normal per usual, as Buffy walks across the grounds with a lollipop in her mouth. While we hear Cordelia chatting near her, she heard it was rival gangs fighting for turf, and all she can say is these people had an ugly way of looking. And how Buffy seemed to know them, which is just too weird. From what she remembers, the whole thing was just a freak show. Buffy, overhearing this, laughs to herself, knowing how people are going to portray the events, and basically out of sight, out of mind, anything that goes on weird in this town. She meets Xander, asking what they were expecting of people's portrayal. Giles and Willow then meet up with them, him saying to the group, people have a tendency to rationalize what they can't explain and forget the rest. Willow arguing that she will never forget any of it. Giles saying, "Good, next time you'll be prepared." Next time? Next time is why? Xander and Willow question him. Well, we prevented the Master from freeing himself and opening the mouth of hell. That's not to say he's going to stop trying. I'd say the fun is just beginning. More vampires, Willow follows up. Not just vampires, Giles continues, getting super excited. The next threat we face may be something entirely different. I can hardly wait, Buffy says joyfully while she looks over at Willow. We're at the center of a mystical convergence here. We might, in fact, stand between the Earth and its total destruction. Well, I gotta look at the bright side, Buffy starts. Maybe I can still get kicked out of school, she exclaims, popping her sucker back into her mouth, and then Xander, Willow, and her start to tread off. Xander adding, yeah, that's a plan, because lots of schools aren't on Hellmouths. Willow telling Buffy that maybe she should blow something up. They're really strict about that. Buffy says she was thinking of a more subtle approach, like excessive not studying. We see the gang growing in distance from Giles as he turns around to head the opposite direction. Pressing his glasses up his nose to fit better, he announces,
The Earth is doomed.
and he walks off screen, and we fade to black. And thus end the episode.
Yes.
We made it through our first 2 episodes of
Anyway.
Buffy. And now we get to move forward on our next episodes, which, like we were talking about earlier today, those being a little bit more monster-centric as the episode by episode plays out. What are some of the thoughts that you have initially on this specific episode and its follow-up to Welcome to the Helma?
So I feel like this episode definitely solidified the more group feel as far as the gang is concerned. Like you start feeling out what everyone's duty is gonna be. I don't really know what other word I'm
How they
looking
all
for,
have a
but does that
place,
make sense?
like
Like,
Willow's
like
computer, yeah.
Willow is the
Xander's
hacker.
the person that's just gonna
Yeah,
insert himself
exactly.
at any given point in time and do the opposite of what you're asking him to do, and also not understand that actually, I'm just gonna say it this way, not understand
Anything.
anything. Exactly. Poor Xander.
Yeah, yeah. And that's another thing I noticed is that he was gonna be that fixture in the group that you're probably very steadily annoyed with, it seems, and to the point in which you're just like, why? Why are we having to reiterate every step of the way? At this point, we're having to take more time to remind you of what's going on in reality than it would to take to
I
do
think
what we're
that's
doing.
fair. I mean, at the same time, like, this type of person probably really does exist. So, I mean, they got a decent portrayal of what a probably a
100%.
16-year-old, rebellious-y kinda, like, boy would do. I mean, honestly, if somebody told me and I was in this situation, I probably would have done the same stuff as Xander and,
You would
like,
be
showing
Xander.
up where I wasn't supposed to be and all this kinda stuff, especially if somebody told me some vampires were real.
Your new name is Brandon
Yes,
Zander.
no Alex, just Brandon Xander. Anyways, but I like how they wrapped everything up. I think it's cool across the whole episode that we see Buffy, like I was saying in the beginning, less reluctant to do her duty as they like leave off. It leaves it very open now to where Buffy's not closed off to her duties as Slayer. And even though they're not looking forward to the next time something's going to happen, they're all like you said, their dynamic is formed and they're solidified as the core four group. It is one of those things moving forward, we can actually get into some like deeper stuff as we get honestly, just as we continue the series as a whole. The first two episodes have to set up so much. So the episodes being part one and part two, it gives us the leeway to now expand even further now that we've got everybody introduced and we've got the natural first little bits out the way so we can get some interesting stuff in our future. Do you have any thoughts on like some things that might happen in the future? We'll jump into your little Slayerette prediction.
I don't really know. I feel like as far obviously some more people are gonna die or turn into vampires, or there's gonna be more of that element as long as the master is at work. I did make a note about how the master is the most entitled fucker I've ever seen, ever, even as a villain. Like, I know all villains are entitled, but this guy is just like, when they panned out to him in that scene where he's like, "How dare she walk this earth?" and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh my God, first off, with all the billions of people on the earth and you can't settle on one of them to drink their blood, you must have this one. You sound entitled. By the way, get your own fucking ass out of your
I
lair and
love
do
how
it
this is
yourself
still
then.
bothering you because in the last episode, you mentioned his entitlement. Like, you're like, if he's not the most entitled motherfucker,
I
like, he
can't.
really is. And he displays that once again in
He
this
is.
episode. But he honestly just displays that, like, he's going to get the job
He
done and
probably
shit like
just like
that. And
that.
obviously, he did not get it done this episode. The master, as we leave the episode, the master is still at bay. He's not rising. But I mean, obviously, we know that he has a whole story. And, we hope that he won't be rising up. But we'll see, like, how his story progresses as we move forward
That's true.
and all that. I know we talked about Xander as far as like character thoughts go. Are there any other thoughts on characters in this, like besides things we've said about Xander and Cordelia already? And obviously, as Buffy as a character already said that this bitch was like power moving it. She didn't stop the whole first problem and struck fear of these vampires. Like they're gonna be on their P's and Q's in Sunnydale at this point because they're gonna be like, oh shit, like we have a Slayer here, this
Hell
is a
yeah.
whole problem.
Yeah, for sure. I also I want to make a note about how Luke's name in my mind is Frankenstein.
Frankenstein.
Brandon all looked at my notes earlier that I had for this episode, and he's like, "Who the fuck is Frankenstein?"
I just wanted to know who you were calling Frankenstein, and you were like that guy you keep doing the voice for, and I'm like, oh god, Luke. Oh my god, but you know what the best part of this is we never have to say anything about Luke again. We never have to hear him go on 18,000-year monologues and profess to everyone everything that's popping into his head because he's dead now. He was a pretty tough looking vampire to fight, but I'm sure he had a boost of energy with the fact that he was the vessel for the
Hell yeah.
master too, but he honestly didn't put up that much of a fight. I feel like his fight at the end of episode one was a lot more secure in his shit because Buffy
Hell
got him
yeah.
and she tripped his ass with fucking a display of natural talents with her mind. I wouldn't have thought of that. I really don't think so.
Yeah.
Do you have some quotes from the episode?
Yeah. I have two different notes. I have paper notes and I have cell phone notes. Oh, okay, yes, the eye thing where the master is like, "You've got something in your eye," and then he literally jabs his freaking eye out. I was like,
Did that
"Really?"
like take you back whenever he stabbed that motherfucker in his eye?
I just could
He's so
not.
theatrical. He's very
He's kinda
sarcastic. Like,
sarcastic.
he's totally a good foe for Buffy because they're very similar in that aspect of humor. It's obviously the writers of the show that are creating this dialogue between these people, but the Master has, like, this
The 2 of them
specialty
could
one,
roast
yeah, and
each
then with
other.
his entitlement, he's like, "I'm gonna jam my finger in your eye." He's like, "I'm entitled to put
I
my finger
know.
in your
I
eyeball."
literally
But he
hate
like
him.
but he's like a stickler too. Obviously, he's ancient and stuff, so he comes from that time frame and era of, like, people being beneath him. He's obviously really, really old, so he's had people following under him for so long, so these people look up to him and put him on a pedestal, and obviously for good reason. He's outaged them. He probably
Yeah.
created half of them because 'cause they're the servants and shit, but the 2 quotes that I wrote down that I liked was whenever Willow makes the comment, she's like, "That's what a secret is, when you know something that other guys don't." And then my other one was an honorable mention for us in the podcast because at the very end of our outro, Giles says in this episode, "The Earth is doomed."
That's true, I didn't think about that.
I put down for our weekly Wiggins, I wrote that Luke going on and on and on was the thing that gave me the Wiggins. I was done with him. Anything give you the wig?
I mean, that really is a good weekly Wiggin. Mine really didn't have anything to do with the actual episode, it had more to do with the fact that, for starters, I noticed that the way that they have the dynamic between the male characters and actors and the female actors is so uncomfortable for me to watch sometimes because I'm like, there was a part where Giles was, like, standing real close behind Buffy when they're, like, in the
Mhm.
bronze, I
Are you
guess,
talking about, like, in the first episode when he's, like, telling
and
her
he's
to
like
hone and stuff?
yeah, that's the first time I noticed it, and then in the second episode, I just kept seeing the same shit because then he was, like, sitting uncomfortably close to, like, Willow in the library, or he, like, likes to
Right.
hover her and, like, be, like, over her, and I'm just like, first off, we can see the age difference here because he's clearly much older than high
Right.
school teenagers, and it's just so cringe for me. That gives me the
I
Wiggins.
feel that. I will say that the show as a whole, they try to be really mindful, I guess I should say, to how they portray Giles in the series. They didn't want that dynamic between Giles to ever be misconstrued or anything like that. Because obviously he's there as the support system. We can never expect Giles to do anything like wrong. Whenever you were saying that, I was immediately thinking like
Sexual.
all the interactions of how comfortable like Xander is with the girls and like we'll talk about it in another episode. I haven't gotten there yet actually. That's episode 5.
I guess he doesn't stand out to me because he's their age or
Right.
portrayed as, they're all like in the same friend group. So of course if they get like intimately close with each other, I'd expect that in a way or something. But it's just like the element of the aesthetic that they're portraying in their age gap where I'm just like,
But
what?
who's our shining slayer this week?
I kind of want to say
Why?
Willow.
Why Willow? WW.
Because I'll point out the obvious, which is that she just saves the day with her incredible hacking skills, apparently. But also, that coupled with the fact that she was savage enough to have Cordelia delete her whole
Yeah,
shit.
she had like a shining
And
moment.
that to me was just like, well, and I think it speaks volumes on her character because, like you said, she's kind of that girl that's like, you're gonna ignore the potential that she's gonna be underlyingly savage back to you. So even when she's telling you something, like she's giving you a piece of advice, you're gonna take it at face value because you're not gonna question that she has ill intention. But she was
Mm.
like, nah, fuck you. So I'm like, really and truly,
Willow's
she could
stepping
start
up.
kicking some
Yeah,
ass
she's
soon.
not like she's not as cowardice as she seemed to be in the first episode for sure. Her display is a little bit more out there,
Exactly.
and she takes that opportunity.
It put a different spin on her character for me, and it gave her so much potential in this very badass way where I was just like, "Okay, we're slowly teetering into some more character, some more, like, a little bit of spice in there that wasn't very obvious that you didn't see coming. Because in the first episode, she was, like, even more timid, more
Mhm.
shy, more, like, susceptible and vulnerable to the
Yeah,
bullying
she
and
would just let
whatnot.
people walk all over her real quick, and now because of Buffy taking a stand and being a great figure for her as a heroine and taking up after her, now she's starting to stand up and being like, "You know what? I can defend myself. If Buffy can do it, I basically can do it. I'm just now making this connection." And that's really cool. She's already empowering those around her, Buffy is, which is great, which
Yes,
is
exactly.
I'm gonna throw out there who my shining slayer is. It's Buffy and the gang. them working together to accomplish the task at hand. It's our first time seeing this
That's true.
happen. And then they wrap it up at the end when they're like, nothing will ever be the same. All the like they just come together in a way to acknowledge everything that's happened. And they're like, wow, only us four know about this. And we have to be the only four for like the remainder of time, as we know, the people who are always going to have to be dealing with this. But yeah, and we already covered
Yeah.
Slayer predictions. I'm excited for, like I said, the next episodes, though, to come. I'm excited for you to see them and see the stuff that unfolds. I know you've already seen episodes 3 and 4 now, which will be cool to do the next go round. Before moving along and wrapping up, I do want to take some time to discuss the metaphors we see along the first 2 episodes. Metaphors are extremely critical to the story and the portrayals of our characters and what they are going through. Most of my info will be coming from Mark Field's book, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Myth, Metaphor, and Morality. And as episodes go on, we will continue to source this book and also tie in our own perspectives of metaphor. Our first metaphor is Buffy's duty as the Slayer and how this isolates her. She is the chosen one, the one girl in all the world. This isolation we will see as a consistent theme throughout the series, but we must understand it's not just Buffy who feels alone. In some sense, we all do. The feelings that others don't fully understand us or realize what we're going through at one time or another. Buffy's isolation may stem from her Slayer status and powers, but it's a feeling we can all identify with. Buffy's role as the Slayer can be seen as a metaphor for growing up. Some people are reluctant to grow up or become mature out of fear for what the real world has to offer. When she rejects her role as the Slayer, she can also be seen as rejecting the idea of becoming an adult. Her not wanting to face her purpose in life chooses to deny her destiny. She didn't ask to be chosen. It was handed to her without question. She understands this, but chooses not to use them. The power to choose is what makes us free. In The Harvest, she is less reluctant in her choice to use her powers when she accepts responsibility for Jesse. Accepting responsibility is the most important theme across the series. And here she accepts it for herself alone when Xander tells her, how are we going to go about doing this? She says, no, not we. She has to do this. Along with this, she makes friends. As it turns out, these friends can help her share the burdens of Slayerhood, making her feel more seen and less alone in her battles against darkness. Xander brings courage, Giles brings knowledge, and Willow offers her smarts and help any way she can. To briefly discuss vampires as a metaphor, they can be seen as adolescence, the failure to grow up. Once again, putting it in the shoes as the role of Buffy and how she doesn't want to grow up. She just wants to exist in the space, the mundane, and to live life as a normal girl, not as the Slayer. Once again, the theme of not wanting to grow up. In these episodes, Buffy commits to her role as the Slayer and accepts responsibility for Willow and Jesse, and then helps stop the harvest. This was personal, and they were becoming her friends, but the question we're left with moving forward is, will Buffy continue to accept her role and her sole responsibility, and not only keeping those close to her safe, but the world? I guess we'll see. But yeah, we'll be back soon for episode 3, which will be Witch. If you have anything to say for Welcome to the Hellmouth and the Harvest, what are you guys' takes on the stuff? Obviously, we have our outro that'll give you all the information of where to find us and leave this stuff, but send us your messages to let us know what you thought of the first 2-hour premiere of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, what it meant to you. Do you remember how you felt whenever you watched it? Who are you guys as shining Slayers, and what gave you guys the weekly wiggins? Because honestly, I want to know what be giving people the wiggins too. We're going to invite everybody else to get the wigs. But either way, we'll
Love the
close up
wigs.
here, and we will see you guys for next episode whenever we get back next Friday and we cover Witch. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you guys next time. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Buffy on Revamped. Remember to join us next week for a new episode release as we continue our journey through Sunnydale. We also would like to hear from you, so share your thoughts. Discuss with us your perspectives on this or previous week's episodes by following us on Instagram and sending us a DM at revamped_rewatch podcast.
Or by emailing us at revampedrewatchpod@gmail.com. Additionally, we will be choosing one of your messages to shout out in an upcoming episode release. And don't forget, if you're looking for a friend and some unsolicited advice for the times when life feels out of orbit, go follow Life in Retrograde Podcast on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts.
Until next time, the Earth is definitely doomed. This podcast is dedicated to the Buffyverse, to its fans, and my sister, Tiffany Dawn Pearson.